May 11, 1943. Attu Island, Aleutian Chain, Alaska. A cold mist rolls in from the Bering Sea, swallowing everything it touches. The wind howls across the volcanic slopes, carrying sleet that cuts the skin like broken glass. Down on the shoreline, men from the U.S. 7th Infantry Division huddle behind the shattered remains of a landing craft, clutching rifles slick with seawater. The first wave had barely made it ashore before the fog closed in completely, visibility no more than 10 feet. There are no trees here, no color, just black rock snow patches and silence. Somewhere ahead, hidden in the mist, are Japanese soldiers who have spent nearly a year turning this barren island into a fortress. Private First Class John Zeman wipes his face with a shaking hand, his breath visible in the freezing air. "Feels like we're fighting on the moon," he mutters. His squad leader, Sergeant Edward Kearns, keeps his voice low. "Quiet, they can hear us before we see them." The landing at Holt's Bay had been delayed for days due to violent storms. Now at last the invasion operation Landcrab is underway. More than 11,000 American soldiers are coming ashore to retake a piece of American soil seized by Japan. It was the first time since the War of 1812 that enemy troops occupied U.S. territory. The Japanese garrison, the 301st Independent Infantry Battalion under Colonel Yasuo Yamasaki, had been ordered to defend Attu to the last man. Only about 2,600 soldiers, but well dug in among caves, cliffs, and snow tunnels. Their positions invisible in the fog. When the Americans landed, they expected light resistance. Instead, they found themselves in one of the most brutal environments of the entire Pacific War. Frostbite began within hours. Rifles jammed with ice. The ground turned to mud under every step. The sound of boots sucked into the tundra mixed with the distant echoes of Japanese mortar firing blind through the mist. A shell lands near the surf, tossing black sand into the air. Zeman ducks, heart pounding. He hears the faint cries of wounded men, distant but sharp. No one can tell where the enemy is firing from. The battle for Attu has begun, and already it feels less like a fight against soldiers, and more like a struggle against the island itself. The next morning brings no sunrise, only a dim gray light filtering through the mist. The fog sits heavy, pressing down like a living thing. Snowflakes drift sideways in the wind. Somewhere up the slope, a machine gun rattles briefly, then stops. The men of the 7th Infantry advance yard by yard through the tundra. Each step is a gamble. They are cold, soaked, and disoriented. Their boots, made for desert warfare in North Africa, are useless here. Feet turn numb. Some men can no longer feel their fingers on the trigger. By noon, the assault battalions, the 17th and 32nd Infantry regiments, have moved inland from the beaches at Holt's Bay and Massacre Bay. But their lines are broken by ravines, hidden gullies, and patches of deep snow. Radio contact fades in and out. Officers use whistles to signal movement, but even those sounds vanish into the wind. Somewhere ahead, beyond the ridges, Colonel Yamasaki's men wait in silence. They had learned from the Arctic terrain long before the Americans arrived. Their shelters are carved into the hillsides, reinforced with rock and driftwood, and camouflaged perfectly against the snow. Snipers move between caves like ghosts. A patrol led by Lieutenant William Boyce of Company C moves up a narrow valley. They find nothing, no sign of movement, until one man kneels beside what looks like a pile of snow-covered rocks. A flash of movement. The rocks explode in gunfire. A hidden Japanese position opens up at point-blank range. Chaos. Men dive into the mud. A medic drags a wounded private behind a rock outcrop. Boyce shouts for suppressing fire, but it's impossible to see what they're shooting at. For the first time, the Americans realize what they are up against. Not an exposed garrison, but an invisible, entrenched enemy who has turned the land itself into a weapon. Throughout the day, the battle grinds forward in inches. At one point, an entire platoon vanishes into a fog bank and never returns. When the clouds finally lift hours later, all that remains are dark shapes in the snow cut down by machine gun fire from a position they never saw. The weather becomes the enemy's greatest ally. Mortar shells detonate prematurely when their fuses freeze. Ammunition boxes swell with moisture. Men begin to hallucinate from exhaustion and hunger. One soldier later recalled, "The cold made us forget there was a war. It felt like the island was trying to kill us first, and yet they keep moving because orders demand it." Colonel Albert Earl Brown, commanding the 17th Infantry, radios Division HQ. Progress slow. Visibility near zero. Enemy unseen. Continuing advance. There's no other choice. The Americans are not just reclaiming a lost island. They are proving to themselves and to the world that the Japanese will not hold even a single inch of American soil. As night falls, the fog thickens again, muffling the sounds of the wounded. Small campfires flicker under ponchos. Men whisper prayers they hope the wind won't carry away. Above them, the peaks of Attu vanish into the clouds, hiding the enemy who listens, waits, and prepares for the next attack. May 13, 1943. 2 days into the assault, and the 7th Infantry Division has yet to see more than fragments of the enemy. What they have seen is the island's cruelty. The wind tears at their faces. The ground offers no cover, just swamp, rock, and snow. Frozen streams cut through the valleys like veins of glass. Even in daylight, visibility rarely stretches beyond 50 yards. From behind ridges and hidden crevices, Japanese rifles crack in short bursts. Then silence again. The Americans fire back into nothing, bullets vanishing into fog. The air smells of cordite and sea salt. Captain Ralph Earl of Company G crouches behind a boulder, shouting over the wind. "They're ghosts! Every time we think we've gotten cornered, they disappear." His platoon sergeant answers without looking up. "Sir, maybe they ain't disappearing. Maybe they're just freezing same as we are." Unbeknownst to the Americans, Colonel Yamasaki had divided his force into scattered defensive cells, each with its own dugout and sniper line. He knew they could never hold the beaches. Instead, his plan was to bleed the enemy dry, draw them deep into the island, make every slope a death trap. Atop one ridge, Japanese gunners peer through slits in snow walls, their weapons wrapped in cloth to muffle the metal's shine. They fire, then vanish into their tunnels. The effect is psychological as much as physical. Every shadow looks like a rifle barrel. Every rock could hide a man. By evening, U.S. engineers attempt to move a bulldozer inland to clear paths for supplies. A single mortar round finds its mark. The machine erupts in flame, its operator thrown clear into the mud. He's alive, but his hands are burned and blackened. A medic presses snow onto the wounds, eyes hollow. There are no proper field hospitals here, only tents whipped by the wind. The Japanese suffer too, though unseen. Many have been trapped without resupply for months. Food stores run low. They eat rice soaked in snowmelt. Some chew on dried kelp washed ashore. Still, morale holds. Yamasaki's men write farewell notes and keep them sealed in their tunics ready for the inevitable. On May 14th, American artillery finally arrives on shore. The roar of 105mm howitzers breaks the island's silence for the first time. Shells scream overhead, slamming into the ridges above Holt's Bay. The bombardment continues for hours, shaking loose avalanches of snow and stone. But when the infantry advances, the defenders are still there, unharmed, waiting. The terrain has betrayed them again. The explosions simply vanish into the soft earth and snow, muffled by nature itself. By the 5th day, progress is measured not in miles, but in bodies recovered. Lieutenant Boyce's patrol is gone, entire platoons scattered. The cold spares no one. Some soldiers collapse with pneumonia, others lose fingers to frostbite. It is no longer clear who controls what. The 7th Division's reports describe unidentified fire from unknown direction. Every hill becomes a question mark. Still, the Americans press on. Their commanders know that retreat is unthinkable. Attu is not just an island, it is a symbol. The first occupied U.S. territory to be reclaimed. As the fog thickens once again, voices echo through the gloom, Japanese close enough to hear, yet never seen. The war here is fought blind, in white silence, where death could come from any patch of snow. May 16, 1943. The fog finally lifts, just enough to reveal what the men have been crawling toward for days. The ridgelines above Holt's Bay, where the Japanese have dug themselves into a honeycomb of machine gun nests, bunkers, and sniper holes. It's the first clear morning in nearly a week. The sunlight, pale and cold, glints off frozen puddles and helmets slick with frost. The brief calm makes the silence unbearable. Then, like the island exhaling, the battle erupts again. Artillery from the beach pounds the slopes. The ground shakes with each impact, sending cascades of snow and mud down toward the Americans advancing below. Companies from the 17th Infantry Regiment push forward in staggered lines, their uniforms already stiff with ice. Some men crawl. Others wade waist-deep through sludge that smells of sulfur and seaweed. Lieutenant Colonel Earl R. Cook, commanding the 1st Battalion, gives the signal. Advance on the left flank, take the high ground above the bay. The men move up, rifles low, bayonets fixed. Halfway up the slope, the Japanese open fire. Bursts of Nambu light machine guns slice through the formation. Men drop instantly, the air filled with sharp cracks echoing between the cliffs. Mortar shells fall among them, muffled by snow but deadly all the same. Private Zeman throws himself into a shallow depression, snow spraying over him. Next to him, his squad leader Kearns yells, "Smoke out that nest!" But his words vanish into the storm of gunfire. A corporal pulls the pin from a grenade, counts to 3, and lobs it uphill. A muffled explosion, then silence from the ridge. The advance continues in bursts. Every yard forward costs another life. From the beach, American destroyers offshore USS Haywood and USS Kane fire their deck guns into the ridges, arcs of flame cutting briefly through the mist. The concussions echo from miles across the island. By afternoon, Cook's men reach the edge of the Japanese main line. They find bunkers filled with bodies, some dead, some merely waiting. A few Japanese soldiers feign death, then open fire at close range. The Americans respond with flamethrowers and grenades, the heat of battle literally melting the snow beneath them. The smell of burning fuel mixes with the cold air, choking and unforgettable. After hours of brutal close combat, Holt's Bay is finally secured. Of the 17th Infantry's assault force, nearly a quarter lie wounded or dead. The Japanese, unwilling to surrender, fight until silence falls completely. At sunset, the surviving Americans dig foxholes in the frozen earth. From the cliffs, they can see the gray water of the bay stretching toward the horizon, dotted with the shapes of landing ships still unloading supplies. One exhausted sergeant mutters, "If this is just the bay, what's waiting in those mountains?" He's right to ask. Because across the island, beyond the fog-choked valleys, lies Chichagof Harbor and the core of Colonel Yamasaki's defense. There, the final and bloodiest stand is yet to come. May 18, 1943, the wind screams across the ridges. Snow whirls in all directions, driven sideways by gales that make it impossible to tell which way is up. From the high ground above Holt's Bay, the Americans begin their push toward the island's heart, Chichagof Harbor, the final Japanese stronghold on Attu. The advance is slow, brutal, and silent, except for the crunch of boots on frozen earth. The 32nd Infantry Regiment leads the way now, reinforced by elements of the 17th. Their faces are windburned, lips cracked and bleeding. They carry rifles wrapped in rags to keep them from freezing to their hands. The terrain grows worse with every step. Ravines cut through the island like scars, forcing men to climb, crawl, and slide through half-frozen mud. Snow hides sinkholes deep enough to swallow a man whole. Communication lines snap in the wind, and runners are sent back and forth, disappearing into the fog for hours at a time. In the distance, a single Japanese machine gun opens up, then goes quiet. The Americans return fire into the mist, unsure if they hit anything. They are learning, though. By now, they've adapted to the cold, wrapping socks over their boots for traction, using captured Japanese shovels to dig shelters, keeping matches in tins near their chests to stay dry. The lessons of Attu, born in suffering, will one day shape the U.S. Army's winter warfare doctrine. That night, the fog clears just enough to reveal something haunting. Small wooden crosses scattered on a slope. Japanese graves. Each marked neatly, some with names in kanji carved into driftwood. The Americans pass in silence. Death feels at home here. By May 19th, the 32nd Infantry reaches Fishhook Ridge, a towering, wind-lashed hill overlooking Chichagof Harbor. Yamasaki's men are waiting, entrenched, cold, and fanatically determined. They have turned the ridge into a fortress of interconnected caves and trenches. Every approach is covered by interlocking fire. The attack begins at dawn. Artillery shells pound the slopes, but many fail to detonate in the soggy ground. The infantry climbs under fire, slipping on ice, dragging wounded back down as others push upward. Private Zeman's unit is pinned halfway up. A sniper's bullet ricochets off his helmet, sending him sprawling. He lies there for a long moment, heart hammering, before realizing he's alive. Kearns grabs him by the collar. "Move! Keep moving!" They're not gonna stop. By midday, the ridge is a storm of chaos. Grenades, screams, snow, and fire. Machine guns rattle from unseen positions. A flamethrower team moves forward, igniting a trench. The fire roars and black smoke twists into the gray sky. When the smoke finally clears, Fishhook Ridge is theirs, but barely. The Japanese have fallen back toward Chichagof, fighting every inch of the way. A radio message from Division HQ crackles through static. "Continue advance. Enemy resistance remains strong. Expect counterattack. That counterattack will come sooner than anyone expects, because Yamasaki knows his time is almost up. His food is gone, ammunition is running low. And rather than wait to die in the fog, he is preparing something no one on Attu, or in the entire Aleutian campaign, will ever forget." May 29, 1943. The night is so still it feels unnatural. The wind has died. The fog hangs low, unmoving, thick as smoke. In the American positions along Chichagof Valley, men lie in their foxholes half asleep, rifles across their chests. The worst, they believe, is over. For 3 weeks, they've fought ridge by ridge across this frozen wasteland. Holtz Bay and Fishhook Ridge have fallen. The enemy must be finished. But in the darkness beyond their lines, Colonel Yasuo Yamasaki is making his final decision. There are fewer than 1,000 men left under his command, some wounded, most starving. They have no hope of reinforcement or evacuation. The Imperial Japanese Navy has already abandoned the Aleutians. Yamasaki gathers his officers in a ruined hut, its walls made of driftwood and frozen earth. Lantern light flickers on their faces. He speaks quietly. We will advance. We will die honorably. His plan is simple and terrible. A banzai charge, one of the largest of the Pacific War, straight into the American lines at dawn. No surrender, no retreat. Shortly before 3 a.m., as a pale light begins to touch the eastern sky, the silence breaks. A deep, rising cry rolls through the valley. Tenoheka Banzai! Long live the Emperor! Then they come. Hundreds of Japanese soldiers, bayonets fixed, rushing through the fog. Many wear bandages over their heads. Others carry only knives or empty rifles. Wounded men hobble beside them, shouting until their voices break. The sound builds like thunder. At first, the Americans think it's an earthquake. Private Zeman jerks awake in his foxhole. What the hell? Before he can finish, shadows surge out of the mist. Rifle fire erupts point blank. The valley explodes in chaos. Machine guns open up from every direction. Tracers streak through the dawn haze. The first wave of attackers slams into the 1st and 3rd Battalions of the 32nd Infantry Regiment, bayonets flashing, grenades bursting among tents and aid stations. It is hand-to-hand fighting, raw and primitive. Japanese soldiers break into a field hospital, stabbing through the canvas. Medics grab pistols and fight back among their wounded patients. Zeman's squad is scattered. He sees Kearns go down, then vanish beneath a tide of charging figures. He fires until his rifle clicks empty, then grabs another from the ground. The screams and gunfire blend into one unending roar. By 5 a.m., the Japanese have broken deep into American lines nearly a mile through. They overrun a battery position, turn captured machine guns around, and fire downhill into their enemy. For a brief moment, Yamasaki's men actually split the 7th Division in two. But it cannot last. American artillery begins firing point blank into their own positions, tearing gaps through the attackers. Tanks Sherman's freshly landed days earlier join the fight, their tracks churning the snow red and brown. By mid-morning, the banzai charge collapses under sheer weight of fire. Yamasaki himself, sword in hand, is seen leading the last dozen men toward a ridge near Engineer Hill. He is shot and killed there, still charging. No Japanese soldier surrenders. When the valley finally falls silent again, the Americans walk through a landscape of horror. Nearly 2,400 Japanese are dead. Fewer than 30 remain alive, most of them unconscious or wounded beyond help. Of the 7th Infantry Division, over 500 Americans have been killed and more than 1,000 wounded. It is the costliest battle ever fought on American soil during World War II. As the fog drifts back over the ridges, the men of the 7th stand among the silence, unsure what they've won, only certain of what it's cost. May 30th, 1943, the morning after the Banzai assault, the valley lies still. The fog returns, soft and heavy, muffling the island in a silence too deep to feel natural. American soldiers move cautiously through the wreckage. Their boots sink into black mud mixed with snow and blood. Bodies, hundreds of them, lie where they fell, frozen in motion, rifles still clutched tight. The Japanese dead are everywhere, in the gullies, under torn tents, in heaps near machine gun pits that never stopped firing. A chaplain kneels beside a cluster of corpses, his breath visible in the cold air. He removes his helmet and whispers a prayer neither side would understand. For the first time in 3 weeks, there is no sound of gunfire. Only the distant crash of waves on the shore below Chichagof Harbor. The 7th Infantry Division begins the grim work of clearing the field. Engineers drag bodies into rows. Medics search for survivors among the piles of dead. But there are few. Some of the wounded clutch grenades, refusing help. One man, barely alive, murmurs, "Banzai," before pulling the pin. The Americans learn quickly, carefully patting every uniform, every hand for the final act of defiance that too often follows the silence. Colonel Cullen of the 32nd Regiment writes in his report that the Japanese fought with a desperation beyond belief. There were no prisoners. Even the wounded, he writes, chose to die rather than be taken. At Engineer Hill, the remains of Yamasaki's final charge are still visible. Spent cartridges scatter the slope. The colonel himself lies among his men, a saber still clenched in his hand. Nearby, soldiers of the 7th raise an American flag over the ridge, not in triumph, but in exhaustion. By evening, the island smells of smoke and fuel. Flamethrower teams move methodically across the battlefield, setting fire to caves and bunkers to prevent any last ambush. The flames glow faintly through the fog, like campfires of ghosts. Private Zeman helps dig graves near the base of the ridge. He doesn't speak, none of them do. They've lost too many kerns among them, found where the first charge broke through. The ground is too cold for proper burial. Engineers use bulldozers to cover the dead. Later, a chaplain will say words over the mass graves, both American and Japanese alike. The wind carries his voice out to sea. That night, Zeman sits alone by a small flame inside a windbreak of rocks. His hands tremble as he opens a letter from home, dated 2 months earlier. He reads it by flickering light, the paper shaking in his grasp. It speaks of sunshine, baseball, and his mother's garden. He folds it carefully and stares into the fog. Around him, the Aleutians are quiet again. No birds, no engines, no battle, just the hum of the wind, and the weight of what it costs to reclaim a land no one had ever heard of before this war. The Battle of Attu is over, but for those who survived, it will never truly leave them. May 29, 1943, Attu Island. The fog that had hidden men and machines for weeks now lifts just enough for the dying to see each other. Before dawn, silence covers the valley, a silence too heavy to trust. Then, from the darkness beyond the ridgeline, a deep cry rises. Not one voice, but hundreds. Tenno Haika Banzai, long live the Emperor! It is Colonel Yasuo Yamasaki. His uniform torn, his sword still at his side. With roughly 800 men remaining, he leads what will become one of the largest Banzai charges of the Pacific War. The Japanese come out of the fog like ghosts. No helmets, no cover, no hesitation. They rush through the frozen valley toward Engineer Hill, where exhausted Americans of the 7th Infantry Division are resting after nearly 3 weeks of non-stop combat. At first, the Americans think it's another patrol. Then they hear the screams. Machine guns open fire, cutting lines through the mist. But the attackers keep coming. Bayonets, grenades, even shovels and knives in their hands. Lieutenant Robert Harkins of Company C recalls, "They came out of nowhere, yelling like demons. I emptied my clip and they were still coming. You couldn't tell who was alive and who wasn't." The Japanese break through the first American line. Chaos erupts. Men fight hand-to-hand among the tents and medic stations. One American surgeon drops his instruments and grabs a rifle. Wounded men crawl out of their sleeping bags to fire pistols at shapes charging through the fog. Colonel Yamasaki himself is seen near the front, shouting orders until a burst from a Browning automatic rifle cuts him down. Even in death, his men keep moving. Some throw grenades into the field hospital. Others turn captured American guns on their former owners. It lasts less than 2 hours. But in that short time, nearly 1,000 men, American and Japanese, fall within a few hundred yards of each other. When the last shots fade, the valley is silent again. The remaining Japanese soldiers, wounded, delirious, gather near the cliffs above Chichagof Harbor. Many pull the pins from their grenades and press them to their chests. By sunrise, it is over. Of the 2,600 Japanese who once held Attu, only 28 are taken alive. The rest, including Yamasaki, are dead, scattered across the tundra he swore to defend. For the soldiers of the 7th Division, there is no triumph. Only exhaustion, disbelief, and an eerie sense of mercy that the island itself seems to grant by swallowing the sound of the last cries. June 1943. The Aleutian wind howls over what's left of Attu. The American flag now flies over the battered ridge of Engineer Hill, but few stand to salute it. Most are too cold, too numb, too tired to care. In makeshift graves along the valley, 549 Americans lie buried, their names carved on rough wooden crosses. Nearby, bulldozers push aside wrecked guns to clear space for an airfield. The battle has ended, but the island still kills. Frostbite, disease, and despair linger long after the last bullet. A chaplain reads softly over the frozen ground. His voice barely carries over the wind. They fought on American soil, and they did not give it up. The U.S. command declares victory, the first and only land battle fought on American territory during World War II. Yet few headlines celebrate it. Attu is too far away, too cold, too forgotten, but its lessons are not lost. The U.S. Army's Cold Weather Division studies everything: how weapons froze, how frostbite crippled units, how medical supplies failed. From these notes, the Army rewrites its entire doctrine for Arctic warfare, knowledge that would prove crucial the next year in Italy, Apennines, and during the Battle of the Bulge in Europe. The Japanese government, meanwhile, remains silent. The fall of Attu is announced as a heroic death, the garrison's fate disguised as glorious self-sacrifice. In truth, it is a shock, the empire's northern defense shattered. By August, when U.S. troops land on nearby Kiska Island, they find it empty. The Japanese, learning from Attu's disaster, had secretly evacuated under fog 2 weeks earlier. The Aleutian campaign is over. Attu will never again have a permanent population. Only the wind, the seabirds, and the rusting remains of war remain to mark where thousands froze, fought, and vanished into the fog. In 1987, a joint memorial is raised, American and Japanese names side by side, honoring the dead of a battle most of the world never knew happened. For historians, Attu stands as a paradox, a small, forgotten battle that shaped both nations' approach to war in the cold. For the men who survived, it was something else entirely, a memory that could never thaw. And for the Pacific War, it was proof that the tide could turn, even in the most unlikely place, a frozen island at the edge of the world.